You might want to start recording it.
I might want to what?
No, start recording. We just
Okay.
did.
So we start to record tonight or tomorrow or today, whatever it is for you. We have with us we have with us Raz Kones, talking about from a soldier of war to a soldier of peace. I'm not going to introduce Roots. I'm sorry, Raz, except to say two things. One is that the youth program of Roots is Raz. She built it from the ground up, from zero, literally. We wouldn't have the program without her. It wouldn't be what it is without her. And the second point is that Raz wouldn't be what she is with the youth program without Roots. What I mean to say is Raz is a quintessential Roots person. She's grown with the organization. The organization has grown with her. Almost everything she says, I think, makes her like a poster girl for Roots. And we're really, really happy to have her here tonight and to have us here since she joined, what is it, 5 years ago? Yeah. So tell us all about it. I'm really excited to hear. Here we go.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Rabbi Hanan for the warm words. For the past almost 5 years, Roots has been like my second home. I think I spend more time at Roots than my actual home. And I'm really glad to see here Bilal, one of the first students in the first year, which we began 5 years ago. I will talk about the program, but it's a new thing for me. Usually I come and I start talking about the youth program and I start talking about the youth experience because I feel this is the biggest influence I can pass on. If I share this amazing and exciting stories of the students who happen to be also my teachers or my team that can't be here today, but without them, I couldn't have done anything from what I've done in the past almost 5 years. But today, Rabbi Hanan asked me to tell my story. And I will be honest with you, it was a challenge for me. I asked myself, but I mean, I want to talk about the students. I want to talk about what we've done. I want to talk about our activities, and I will talk about our activities. But suddenly I understood, as Rabbi Hanan said, through the process of trying to understand what I want to share with you today, that that my story, my background, the things I've been through, in many ways influenced the way the youth group and looks like today, and what I do in Roots. So I'm really excited. It's also a first time for me, and I want to begin with a small exercise. I want us all. I will try. It's more difficult to do it on Zoom. Usually I do it when I can see the people, but I still want to give it a try because I think it's very significant to understand the process that I feel that I went through in my own life, and maybe to understand, to have a small peek to the reality of the Israeli and the Palestinian people in this land. So I want us to start by closing our eyes. And maybe whether if it's afternoon for you, or maybe it's night, maybe it's morning, but maybe you can try to let go of what has been until now, or all the missions you have to do later, and just try to focus in this moment. And I would like to ask you to imagine what life looks like in the country of Israel, whether you call it Israel or whether you call it Palestine, in 50 years from now, after a peace agreement was signed between Israeli and Palestinian authorities. And I want you to try and imagine not only how does it look like, or what do people talk about in the media or in the newspapers, and who are the main authorities. I want you to try and think, how does it feel in your body, and how is it for you? What is your experience? Who are your friends if you come visit Israel, or if you live here in Palestine? So where do you go visit? Where do you walk around? What do you do? What do you talk about? What happened? What's with the army? With what are the borderlines? Maybe how does it look like? How does it feel like? And how does it influence your own personal life? And I want us to take just a few more seconds to try to really imagine this kind of reality. And I want us to slowly come back, because we don't have all the time in the world. And I want us to ask the question, first of all, as if anybody has done this before, maybe you can even just write it on the chat, on the small chat box. But how many of us have ever done this before? Have ever tried to imagine a different reality? And how hard was it for us to imagine this? A better reality than the one we know and suffer from today. And I want to share with you, I did the same exercise this morning. I gave a lecture to a pre-military academy, and young students in their gap year before the army, 18-year-olds, and each and every one of them said it was impossible for them to imagine a different future or a better future. And that's interesting, because the person who did this exercise is a brilliant researcher in the subject of psychological and societies and their psychological aspect, and he studied for many years societies in conflict. His name is Eran Halperin, and he tried to focus on the psychology of societies in conflict, and he asked these questions many Israelis and many Palestinians. And he said that the vast majority, said it was almost impossible for them to imagine a different future. And that's interesting, because the psychological definition of hope is the ability to imagine a better future, but not only that, also the sense of capability to take action and create a new path that can bring this better future to reality. And it's not, and hope is not something nice to have. It's something that feeds us. It's something that gives us energy and motivation to act in this world. And one of his questions was, how come our society, the Israeli society and the Palestinian society, became desperate nations? How come we lost something so basic, so inherent, like hope? And he held on another research where he took a group of Israelis and a group of Palestinians, and he didn't talk with them about the conflict, but he convinced them that societies can change. And what was so interesting about this second research is that the conclusion was that many of the participants, even if they who are very strong in their ideological point of view were willing to make very big sacrifices on their ideological premises once they believed that the other side can change, that transformation is possible. And I feel this is something very deep. Many times what prevents us from acting and prevents us from acting to feed hope is our belief that the other side will not change, whether it's in our personal relationship and whether if it's as a society. And tonight, I want to share with you my own story of transformation, my own proof that the transformation is possible through my own personal story. I believe very much in the power of stories. And I believe this conflict is shaped by the way we choose to tell our story. Again, not only as individuals, but as societies. And I feel that by sharing my story, I want to try and expand those ripples of change. I want to begin with my family. My parents are here. I see them as the foundation from which I grew. And in many ways, my family story led me to where I am today. I can see here also my grandmother, which is very special for me, that she's here with us. And in many ways, my grandmother's story is what shaped my story. I was born and raised in a suburb of Beersheba, and by immigrant parents, actually. My mother came here in her 20s from Canada, and my father came in his 20s from Greece. And after they grew up in Holocaust survivors' homes, my grandparents at both sides are Holocaust survivors. And for example, my grandmother who is here, she lost everything she ever knew in the Holocaust. She was 13 years old and alone in the world. And in many ways, Zionism saved her. Because of Zionism and because of the right of the Jewish people got to immigrate to Israel, to the state of Israel, I am here today. And I feel that my parents immigrated to Israel out of ideological reasons and out of the understanding that they have no other land, that the Jewish people have no other land and have no other opportunity. And I grew up with the understanding and belief that, like I said, that Zionism and the land of Israel is what saved my grandparents' lives. And I had the privilege, I saw myself privileged to grow up in dignity, free of racism. And that the loss of Israel, and for me, the loss of the land of Israel means a tragic fate, as my grandparents had to suffer. And at the same time, I do want to say and add that my parents, who saw the devastating consequences of racism towards their parents, fought for peace all their lives, even when it was considered unacceptable in the religious society in which we lived. And I even remember myself, and this is something I want to share with you. So just to try and let you understand a little bit of maybe what not only me, but many young religious girls in the religious Zionism society, I was kind of ashamed of their leftist attitudes. And I felt it contradicts the Zionist religious society, and where I went to school and the friends I had. I actually attended a religious Zionist school, a dorm school for girls, and I didn't really talk about those leftist attitudes. Many of my friends were settlers. They lived in the West Bank, and I felt it might offend them because I couldn't see how trying to promote the rights of the Palestinian people cannot contradict the the aspiration for the whole land of Israel, or the Zionist aspirations as they are taught in the religious education. And when I reached my 12th grade, because I was raised in this kind of home, it was clear to me I wanted to join the army. And I felt this was the best way to prove loyalty to my nation. And I will say it wasn't really acceptable in my religious school, because religious girls are not supposed to go to the army. But I felt that this is my right, this is my privilege. I mean, by going to the army, I have the privilege to defend my people. And not once did I think about the Palestinian side and the Palestinian point of view. It didn't even cross my mind, because I was never exposed to a Palestinian person. And my first job as an 18-year-old soldier was observing the borderline in the West Bank border. And my job was to prevent hostile trespassers from entering Israel or any settlement in the region. And I sat for hours, literally hours. It was one of the most difficult things I have ever done. But I believed this is the right thing to do. And I had all the motivation to do also something that I think for many people sounds impossible, to sit hours over hours and looking at a screen and trying to prevent people from crossing the borderlines. But these people didn't look like people. And this is something I want to emphasize on. These people on the screen were small black dots. And for me, it was clear that every single dot on the screen I saw was a potential terrorist. Because I knew that just a few months before I started my job there, one of those small black dots jumped over the fence and attempted to shoot a pregnant woman in a small town near my parents' town. And I knew many people from that settlement and that area, and I could easily imagine one of my friends or family in the same place where that woman was shot. So it was clear to me that this is exactly the way I'm supposed to treat those black dots. Day and night, I called the armed forces and led them to the area I recognized on screen that was about to be trespassed. And the 18-year-old soldiers, the combat fighters who were out there in the field, like me, believed, just like me, that those people are potential terrorists. And they treated them accordingly. I would like to share another experience from my time as a soldier. My army service in the beginning, as I explained, wasn't really easy. Actually, it wasn't easy at all. I felt I was sacrificing my most beautiful years, and every time I faced the question, why am I doing this, I answered with the story I heard from the very first day in the army. They took our unit to visit Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum. And a young man we met there lectured in front of us, and he shared that when he was a combat fighter in the army, he caught a Palestinian man with explosives on his body on the way out of a central public bus station. And when this young soldier asked him how come he did not prosecute the attack, because I mean, it's weird, he was on his way out, and how come he's going out of the place he was supposed to execute this terror attack? And he asked him, how come you did this? And the answer was surprising. He said, I just saw many soldiers going on the bus, and I got cold feet, and I decided I'm not going to do this. And he tried to ask him, were they boys, girls, men, women? Did they have a weapon? Didn't they? And he said, I don't remember. I just remember the uniform, olive green. And I remember looking at myself with those olive green uniform with so much pride. I felt just by wearing this, I am preventing people from hurting my family and my friends. And I looked around me and the Holocaust pictures, and I imagined my grandparents, and I looked at And we had this small document. It's like an ID, that a special ID you get in the army. Everybody has it, and in a small writing on the bottom of it, it says, "I am serving my mandatory service in the IDF." And I remember thinking to myself, and later I wrote it down, and it was very interesting for me to read it again recently, after a few years, after almost 10 years. And I remember I wrote down that for me, to serve the army is an honor and a privilege, and it's not just an obligation. It's not just mandatory. And my desire to continue and to contribute to my country pushed me to proceed to officer's course. And I became an officer in the combat support department. I moved up to the intelligence corps. And for my first job as an officer, I got a job as a head of a training course for young soldiers who just recruited to the intelligence department. And I was supposed to teach them about the history of the conflict. And as I prepared the lessons, I started reading more, and I started researching all these new subjects that I have never learned before at school. And I acknowledged how much I did not know. And I was eager to learn more and more. So I kept reading. And I came upon a small article that wrote about a crazy rabbi. That's how they defined him. Rabbi Menachem Fruman, an Israeli Orthodox rabbi, a settler, and a peacemaker, and a negotiator, whose closest ties were to Palestinian religious leaders. And sometimes, and I read about him meeting even people who had blood on their hands, and I was amazed. Again, I met this thing that I always thought cannot live together. And I was fascinated, and I decided that I have to meet this person. So even though at first it sounded surreal, I mean, how does an ideological Zionist settler believe in peacemaking? I kept reading about him, and I understood that there's something that I have to get more into. And I did that. I found a way to join weekly sessions in his house, where he taught Kabbalah. He didn't teach about the conflict. But what happened there, that I became very close to his family. And it happened to be the last year of his life. And I grew closer and closer to his family. And I cannot forget the picture in my mind of his funeral, just a few months after we met. I came to this funeral, and I saw Arab sheikhs, settlers, secular, ultra-Orthodox people, and they were all crying over this person. And that day I realized that my path was tied in the path of the Fruman family. And I had a strong feeling that it's going to be a lot bigger than I could ever imagine. Although back then I could not really imagine how much this feeling was accurate. So when I finished my army service after almost 5 years, between me and myself, I count also the years in roots, and I try to see when am I gonna be at roots more time than I have been in the army. and I finished my army service, and my last job was in a secret and an elite unit in the intelligence department. And I felt I have fulfilled my service in the army, and that it's time for me to make time for my personal passion, the field of education. So I was determined to continue the significant work I did in the army, and I was looking for a job with meaning. And I immediately got a job as an instructor in a pre-military academy program, which is a gap year before the army, where 18-year-olds, boys and girls, secular and religious, try to deepen their sense of identity. And for me too, it was an opportunity to deepen my own sense of identity, to ask difficult questions, to understand how to bring together different parts of my personality. And back then it was more about being secular or religious. But I think this is one of the first moments I understood how amazing it is when you bring together people who don't think alike. And by the end of that year, I felt I felt I did something very meaningful, but I was expecting a break. I was expecting a summer break. I had a lot of plans. But what actually happened by the end of that year is that the 2014 Gaza war, also known as Operation Proactive Edge, broke out. And my boyfriend back then was an officer that was an expert in the field of tunnels. And I have never been so scared in my life like I was in that summer. I could not sit at home quietly, and I decided to volunteer to the department I left a year ago in the Army. I called up my commander. I told him, listen, I cannot sit at home and I want to join. And I was amazed to see the behind the scenes of war. It is not an easy thing. I mean, when you're a citizen, so you see on television that we are winning and we're proceeding, and even though there's a lot of pain, because every day we were informed of soldiers who died during the war. The feeling I had as a citizen before I recruited to the reserve in the Army was that we're winning and it's going to end soon. And once I went into the reserve and I saw what's really happening, it was clear to me that everything we will do will not prevent the next war, but only delay it for a few years. Actually, with my conversation with my boyfriend back then, I remember him telling me that finishing the Gaza story is not something that is even possible. And it was so difficult for me to understand, after listening every day to how more and more soldiers were announced dead and hundreds of Palestinians were killed, that this is something that is part of a never-ending blood cycle. And when the war ended, I felt like all my motivation and energy had gone down the drain. And the year after the war was one of the hardest years of my life. So by the end of that year, I did what most Israelis, some of you might be familiar with it and some of you not. I did what most Israelis do when they finish the army. I flew as far as I can. I flew to the other side of the world to travel South America with an open ticket, not really understanding when or if I'm going to come back. And I was seeking for peace, a different kind of peace. I was seeking peace inside of me. And I believe that I will find it in the high mountains of Peru and Bolivia. But I didn't. I actually learned that the places I felt the most peaceful were in communities, where I learned about different cultures and religions. I discovered how enriching interfaith interactions were. I learned that sharing my religion and faith with others was not an obstacle, but an opportunity to enrich and learn from each other. And that my strong sense of identity was a tool for connection once I let go from the fear of those who were different from me. And I think this is something that I also find in common with many other young people like me. the fear of what is not me. And there in the high mountains of Peru, I understood I want to go back. I understood that maybe the life in Israel is not as peaceful as it is in South America, but it is my home. And I want to bring my new understandings to fix what is wrong and to influence reality where I come from. My friend told me something very sweet that stayed with me. She said that it's not a big effort to be water in the river. And if you had the privilege to find water, take it to the desert where water is rare. So I flew back. And in one of my first days back home in Israel, I went to visit the Fruman family. And I asked Hadassah, and she was Rabbi Fruman's wife. I asked her straightforward, how can I join and help out with her peace building projects? So she put me in contact with a young teenager, a settler named Eden Riskin from a settlement called Efrat. And that young man told me he is trying to establish a youth program for Palestinians and settlers. Needless to say, I hardly believed his words. He asked me to lead the establishment of the process of this program. And I said, not only that I don't have time for this thing, that it's a crazy idea. But he convinced me to come for one meeting. And I was, so I did. Just to have a small look at this crazy. And I came to the small farm in the land of the Abu Awad family in the Gush Etzion intersection, where represents the place that represents for many of us Israelis and Palestinians is one of the bloodiest and most and fear-causing places in Israel. And I came with this young man to a Palestinian farm. And Eden, without asking me, introduced me as the founder of the Coming to Be youth program of Roots. And I looked at him, and I looked at the young, brave people in front of me, and I just couldn't say no. So at first I told myself that I'm gonna just help them establish this program and find somebody to be there instead of me. As you see, this plan didn't really work. And in that same evening, I told him, okay, I'm willing to help, but I need a Palestinian partner. And he introduced me to Shadi Abu Awad, which maybe some of you may know. And I asked him to be my partner in this crazy adventure of establishing a settler Palestinian youth group. He looked at me and he said, okay, let's try. I mean, we have nothing to lose. And that day was the beginning of my long joint journey with an amazing team and partner, a journey that will conclude soon to almost 5 years. That moment 5 years ago was a moment that in many ways I feel changed my life. That moment was the first moment I met a Palestinian person, flesh and blood, outside the screen, and did not think of him as a potential terrorist. He was not my enemy, he was my ally. And I remember how in one of our first hiking trips, that was just a crazy story and so surreal every time I talk about it. We took the youth inside of Israel because usually the Palestinian don't have permits. So it's a very special thing. They're very excited and enthusiastic. It's the first time they will see the sea, the ocean. And we went through a checkpoint. And Shadi pointed out an area in the forest where the fence goes through, and he said, you see that place? That's where I jump over whenever I need to go early to work. I go, what? what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, that's where I always jump because I start work at 6 a.m., but my permits it's only from 8 a.m. So I have to jump over the fence. And I didn't know if to cry or to laugh, but in that moment, I understood that something big is happening. And I understood that, and I shared it with Shadi, that if we would have met a few years ago, the end of the story would have been very different. And I understood that those black dots I used to see on the screen, they were not potential terrorists. Not all of them, at least. It made the picture that was very clear to me a complicated one. Yes, one of them might have been a terrorist, but one of them might have been Shadi. It is then that I acknowledged the craziness of our reality. I told him that if we would have met a few years ago under different circumstances, it would have been crazy, and we managed to laugh about it. But I knew I could never go back to the person I have been as a soldier. And my enemy in that moment became my partner, my ally. And he was the one I shared with my deepest fears and secrets. And he was the one fighting for a higher cause by my side. And as I told you before, I remember reading my memories from the army and noticing the words I myself wrote just a few years ago, that for me to serve in the army is an honor and a privilege and not just an obligation. And I knew this has changed. I suddenly understood, yes, it is an obligation to go to the army, but it is not a privilege. And it is not the reality I want to see in the future. It might be obligatory today, but I want to change that. I want us to live together and manage to see the other side as an ally and not as an enemy. My friendship with Shadi, with Waji, with Khaled, with Iyad, and all my wonderful students who are also, as I said, the biggest teachers I was privileged to get, they taught me the painful consequences of the military control over the Palestinian people. They made me acknowledge how much influence we have as a nation with sovereignty, power, and strong army over the Palestinian people. And with great power comes great responsibility. And I then saw myself responsible. And I felt that if in my previous perspective, the way to defend my people was to go to the army, I understood that in a deeper way, defending my people means to promote a future where there is no army, or at least not an army that is in charge of civilian people. And it widened my perspective of what is defending my country, what is defending my people. Because I feel that in many ways, if we proceed with reality the way it is today, we are hurting ourselves from within, and we are not even acknowledging this is happening. And that made me acknowledge that there is no right for the Jewish people in this country if we will not learn how to live here with another nation and take care of them, of the minority within us. And that taught me that my friends have also equal rights, or the right for equal rights on this very same land. A nation I did not acknowledge before. A nation that had no face, had no name, had no hopes, had no dreams. Until Shadi came into my life and taught me that transformation is possible in him and in me and in all our amazing students. And I did not believe that transformation is possible. Not for ourselves as an individual, but also not for our societies. That also, I remember that just this morning, one of the students asked me if I was able to imagine a reality, like I asked you in the beginning of the session. And I said, I really believe that if you would have asked me 5 years ago, my answer would be no. But today my answer is yes. I can imagine, because I have proof. I have witnessed proof that transformation is possible. So it is almost impossible to share with you the most incredible, challenging, disturbing, and inspiring events that we've been through in the past almost 5 years. And I still ask myself, are we really influencing? Is it not just a drop in the sea? But I'm proud to say that the value of our work has proven itself time and again. We created a space where youth from both sides can get involved in their societies and show there is another way, expanding the circles of influence. Our alumni have led day camps during the summer holidays, have created after-school programs to first and fourth graders, and they visited families attacked by extremists and led conversations with students their age from all over the country. Even parents of our youth who were against the participation of their children at first are today taking active roles in the Roots program for adults. Just a few months ago, and this is our most recent amazing story, we took our students to a field trip in the Dead Sea. We took advantage of a small gap in the Corona close downs, and a young man named Umar from Jericho saw this group of youth, of young people, playing around and laughing, and he was amazed to hear that they are settlers and Palestinians from the Hebron region. He was so inspired, he came up to me and he asked to create a similar group in his own region. And maybe you have heard his story last week. His name is Omar. But next week will be our first meeting with 18 Palestinians from Jericho and another 16 young adults from other settlements around the Jordan Valley. And this is, I feel, the story of Roots. Because by being transformation and proving transformation is possible, we feed hope. We feed hope from one to the other, and we feed hope to the people around us. And that will be the motivation that will make people, will give people the possibility to imagine a better future and also to take action to promote this better future. And I want to conclude and leave some time for questions. I will conclude with a sentence one of my students on the Israeli side taught me. He said that before he joined Roots, he used to think that in order to achieve peace, we need to find a solution. And he asked himself, what is the solution that will bring peace? But he said after 3 years in Roots, he understood something different. He understood it's the opposite way around. He understood that first we need to achieve peace and create peace, and then solution will come. And this was very strong for me. And with this, I want to conclude my story. Thank you very much for listening. And and we'll open up some time for questions.
Before the first question, I just want to say personally, that was unbelievably moving for me. You had tears come to my eyes many points, Raz. You so much were able to take us on your journey and to feel what was going on in your soul. And indeed, I know that that your journey has brought so many young people along with you, just like Roots has brought so many people along that same journey. and you expressed it so well. And I just have a sense that everyone who's listening today now really understands roots. That was it. So I'm so happy that you spoke. But we're not
Thank you.
finished.
Yeah, we're not finished, but thank you for the opportunity as well.
So if anyone wants to ask a question orally, you can just unmute and do so. If you want to put it in the chat box, I will see the questions and read them. If you want to write in the chat that you want me to call on you, it's all open, it's all free.
Raz.
Yes.
Yes. Hey, Andy.
Alan, do
Good to-
you, Raz, do you still do miluim? Do you still
Yes.
do reserve duty?
Yes, I do the reserve duties. And I want to share that I changed my mission in the reserve duty. And today, my job is I'm in charge of being, how do you say, yoetzet?
An
Advisor.
advisor.
An advisor for it's hard for me to translate the name of it, so maybe Rabbi Hanan, you can help me, and
I can
or Andy, היועצת לכל הפן ההומניטרי בעזרה לאזרחים הפלסטינים בחירום.
So Raz is an advisor for humanitarian activity vis-a-vis the Palestinian civilian population.
Yeah, and it's important for me to share this because for many people, serving the army contradicts trying to promote the rights of the Palestinian people. But for me, I try to take action in two levels. I'm trying to change the future, but I also am trying to change the present. And I feel that today, it is not possible to close down the army. It will not happen. But if I am an officer in a place that tries to promote humanitarian help to the Palestinian citizens, then I will have more influence on the life of my Palestinian friend by helping them through that than I will have by not going to the reserve in the army.
Maybe the next question really then is for some of our Palestinians that are taking part in the conversation, like Belal. How do you feel about what Raz just said? Does that come across when officers like Raz try and act differently than many Israeli officers do? Like, what's your reaction, Palestinian participants, to what Raz just said?
I think what Raz said is do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think what Raz said is very important because she put her humanity in the job that she's doing, and that's very important, especially when you walk in the army or security forces, not just here in the whole Middle East, actually, not just here, because I think much of the reactions of people are actually caused by the authoritarianism of army and police, in my opinion, not ideological reactions or national reactions, especially from Palestinians in the West Bank, as I see, is that a lot of people who do or go to violence are not ideologically or motivated by ideology. They are motivated by the victimhood that they feel, that they don't have equal rights, or they are being enforced in some kind of injustice that they can't. That we transform the ways of how people react, or the ways of how people want to express their own feelings in another non-violent ways, because ending the conflict in general, I don't think it's possible, not just here, actually, in many countries, especially in the Middle East. I think that we need another way of trying to transform conflicts into a more constructive ways in terms of expressing in terms of humanity, human rights. And right now we cannot. I think what Raz said about the army is true in the perfect world, but right now we cannot actually do that because we have a lot of problems. But we need to transform the conflict. It's very important.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you for your words.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
Next question, point, comment,
I have a question, please.
Andrew.
So first of all, I'd like to say that I really agree with everything that Hanad said about the story. It was amazing. It's really inspiring, and I appreciate your honesty and just hearing, I guess, what led to the transformation that you talked about, and even the year that you went to South America just to get away, and how eventually you came back, and just appreciate your openness to trying new things until you begin to experience what you thought peace would look like. So it's really inspiring. So question. So your colleagues that you shared with when you were in the Army, like in the elite unit and before that, are you able to talk with them much about your experiences and roots? Are they open to hearing about that? And can you share with them? And what is their reaction when you do?
Okay, thank you for your question. So I will say, first of all, that the vast majority of my friends are very supportive of my work at Roots. And I feel it's important to say that the majority of the people my age are able to think in a complex a way of thinking, and to accept this way that this path that I have chosen, and it's something that that happens when you are exposed to different ways of thinking, and it's something that we lack when we're younger, because when we're in school, when I was in school, and most of my friends, so I believe when I talk to people, to 18-year-olds, it's a lot more difficult, because it makes them question very deep and important aspects of their identity, and it has to be a lot more gentle, the process of exposing them to this way of thinking that I have shared with you today. But I find it a lot easier when I talk to my friends, because I feel they have been through this reality, and many of my friends that are boys that have been through combat service throughout their army, they have seen so much pain that for them it is clear that something has to be done differently, and they're happy that I'm there. But I will say that most of my friends, it's too difficult to face this subject on a daily basis, and it's a difficult decision to say that they would like to join something that tries to make change, because it's for many people my age, it's a traumatic story, and it's difficult to face it. But they are supportive of my work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raz. I don't see in the chat any questions. I'm looking on my screen.
Hanan and Raz, I would like to add something. Raz, I knew your story, and it's always so powerful. So thanks again. As everyone said, everybody is touched and very moved by your words, your journey. So a big claps. Okay, this is first. Second, I would like you to tell to the audience what you are doing with the youth, maybe very shortly, in few words. I'm very proud to be a supporter of the youth program, and I really would like to encourage everyone to join Roots and to help as much as you can, because the youth are really the future, and you are creating this space, the space for peace. So keep going, and again, a big claps. So in
Thank you,
few words,
Tanya.
if you can explain what you are doing with the youth,
Yes,
meeting
yes.
after meeting.
Thank you for the opportunity, because this is my favorite subject to talk about.
Yes, you wanted to tell.
So it's a good question. So I will talk a little bit about our youth program. So actually, in the first year of the program, we built it step by step together with the youth. We had this young crew, boys and girls from both sides, and we would just sit together once every month and ask ourselves what is interesting for us. What do we want to do? What are our goals? What is our vision? And by the second year, I learned from them what are the most important things that I want to give these young and brave people who come to this program. And I understood that one of the most important things that we need to create in this special space we have in the land of the Abu Awad family is a place that can give young people tools to take responsibility and to feel the sense of capability to make change. So we meet once every 2 weeks, and we study about our own identity and also about the other side's identity. And we look upon the subject of identity also in aspects of individual identity, but also in aspects of religious and cultural identity. And we look at it also through both narratives, and we study both narratives. And one of the things that is very important also for me that our program will have is that it won't be only talking, but also doing. So that was why we always try to think how to bring our words into action and how to influence our own communities and families, also apart, but also together. And the students, the youth, they are very involved in creating the way the program looks like. So every session we will have will be led by the youth themselves. So maybe we will talk about narratives, but what exactly we will talk about and how it's going to be done will be decided by the youth themselves. And this is what gives them also the sense of capability, but also the curiosity and the motivation to try and research by their own. And I feel that the youth usually support this feeling that they come out of Roots with more questions than answers. But for me, this is the goal. I want them to understand in a better way what are the important questions to ask, and to go out to the world with those questions and the motivation to keep researching the answer for them. And another aspect of our activities is to try to create a community that talks in a complicated way, that can see things in a broader way than black and white and religious or secular or settler or right wing or left wing. And I feel this is, and expanding this and supporting this community is by supporting also an alumni program and a young children program and more programs throughout the West Bank. And this is also what we specialize in. I mean, we are the only youth program in the West Bank that allows settlers and Palestinians to meet each other, not in the checkpoint.
How many youth do you have this year?
This year we have 30. We had more, but because of the corona, we kept it small because so we can have the opportunity also to meet each other face to face when possible. Richard, I see you.
Yes. The last thing you said just raised a question for me. Israelis and Palestinians are meeting together, youth are meeting together, but you have to meet in one place. You can't stand on each side of the border and talk across to each other. So how do you work that out? How do you make that safe, comfortable, possible, and productive?
So we have the privilege to have the land of the Abu Awad family. It's in a sea area, which is possible for both sides to come to with no permits. And it is true that we need to watch our backs, and we have somebody that's always there to take a look of who's coming in. But until today, most of the people who found the land just came and supported, and they joined, and we had good feedback and support from the community. Not everybody, of course, but the experience until now is that it's a safe place. It's the only place that is it's like a small island of sanity, where we try to create an example that can show people that it is possible.
I just want to add to that, Richard and everyone, that the land of the Abu Awad family, that little farm that Raz was talking about, the family already 7 years ago decided to dedicate that little piece of land to creating a better future for both sides. And we created there the Dignity Center, Merkaz Karama. The Dignity Center is basically the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank / Judea Samaria / Palestine. And before the corona, and I'm sure after the virus as well, we had there and we will have there Israelis and Palestinians talking, meeting, discussing, arguing, playing, learning together almost every day. We've had certainly 2,000, 3,000 Israelis and Palestinians there over the course of the past 7 years. We've had about 110,000 people from around the world have come to see our activities. And the youth movement is certainly the icing on the cake of what we do there in the Dignity Center. So Raz, there's a question in the chat, and it asks, first of all, what are the ages of the young people in the youth program? And then it asks, after the youth program, is there anything they can go on to within Roots to stay involved and active?
Okay, it's a good question. It's the age group is between 16 to 18, and that's in our core program. In the program we're establishing in the Jordan Valley, it's going to be between 25 to 30. But the youth program in Gush Etzion, they finish if they come, let's say when they're 16, so they can proceed until they're 18. But then usually the Israelis will go to the pre-military academy or a gap year, and then to the army. And the Palestinians will proceed to university. But we did understand that we want to create a community that will give extra activities and a home also for our alumni. And this year we have a new team that is what they do. They focus on the alumni, how to create further programs that can enrich them, that can develop them, that can bring them together. And hopefully this will just grow and grow. And of course, that every opportunity I have to, if I hear from my friends that they work in different peace organizations, of opportunities that can be relevant to our alumni. So I always try to make these connections.
When Raz mentioned the team that's in charge of the continuing program for the youth, she didn't mention that she's the supervisor of those people who are making that program happen.
Yeah, I try.
So David Hepler says he has 2 questions. David, you can unmute yourself. I guess you already are, and ask the questions.
Okay, I've written the first one here is, what are your current budgetary needs and how much money do you need to spend or raise in order to increase your activities with a greater level of impact beyond what you're doing now? That's my first question.
It depends how much you have, David.
Not a lot, but sometimes it helps if you need $2 or $3 million, then it helps us to visualize and pray for that much at least.
Okay, Raz.
So for the youth program, for a full year, without a seminar in Switzerland, with which we hope to have this year, Fiona, which is here with us, a very close friend and partner. So it's about 200,000 shekel. How much is it in dollars today?
That's $60,000.
50,000.
Yeah. So that
That's
is the
very doable.
That's for our basic program, and right now we have no budget for the program in the Jordan Valley. We're kind of trying to.
I just want to make a correction. The because of the exchange rate, that's about now $75,000-$80,000.
Oh.
That was that's our minimum budget, but it is and as I said, I mean, one of the greatest thing we had the privilege to do was to go on a 10-day seminar in Switzerland with Coexistence, which Fiona here is in charge of, and it was a very, very important and exciting experience for our youth. And this is something that I put in the budget. This is like for our basic program, a year-long program from October to August. And there was another question here.
Yes, my other question was, have your parents and brothers and sisters been participating with you?
So they can answer. They're here. They've been very supportive. My parents have visited the land, the small farm in Gush Etzion, and so has my brother a few times, more than once. And they're there to support me when it happens, when I'm devastated because something has gone terribly wrong, or when situations are also very happy. So they're always there to support me, and I think this is the best way to participate in the program.
Maybe I can say something. I'm Raz's mother, and her father's here as well, and my mother is here. And I think that one of the points that Raz brought up, which was very significant for all of us, is that we really believe that as observant Jewish people, that this is the way to go, that this is the moral, ethical lesson that I learned in my home with my parents, and Mati learned in his background, and nothing could make me happier than to see it in Raz and to see the impact it has on all these wonderful young people. Because for us too, meeting Palestinians was a new experience. That's it. Yeah.
Viti, your encouraging words were very inspiring, and it just confirms the validity of what's going on here. Thank you for sharing that input.
And I want to take on and say this is what my personal experience of understanding how much influence does the way you grow up has on what you choose to do is what motivates me to work with youth and to see their own influence. I know they will raise their children differently, and they talk about it. And I know that when they bring Fiona told me to talk about it, when they bring their parents, and their parents at first, I mean, the youth, they always laugh at me that I talk to their parents more than I talk to them, which is true, because their parents find it so difficult that their children are going and meeting Palestinians on the other side, or Palestinians are meeting Jewish people on the other side. It's so difficult for their parents. And I see that many of them, by the end of the year, they will say, I just saw my child so happy and interested in so important subjects that I understood that I have to come and understand what it's all about. And once they come, so they're in.
And we're talking a lot about parents here, and there's a question, how do the youth change their parents? That's from Fiona.
Yes, so this is what I was trying to answer. It's the way they talk to them, they ask them difficult questions, they consult, they come home and they have huge questions and they ask their parents, and their parents start asking themselves the same question. I had one of my students' father, he came, David Hanan Palant, that and he came and he said, thanks to my son, for the first time in my life, 60 years on this earth, I have met a Palestinian person. And he later joined, and he led this consultant program for Palestinian young people voluntarily. And he said that it's thanks to my son, straightforward. So we have the new generation influencing also the older generation.
There are two questions in the chat that I guess are more for Roots than for the youth program, more for me. Robert McRoberts asks, do we have any programs in connection with Musalaha? And he also asks, do we have any contact with Tent of Nations? So just briefly, the answer is contact with both of those organizations we have, but programs together with them, cooperation, we don't. Tent of Nations is a Palestinian organization that's about 3 or 4 kilometers from the Root Center, and we know about each other, and we've talked to each other, but for various reasons, it's not been possible to do anything together. Musalaha is a Palestinian organization within the boundaries of Israel that does reconciliation, mediation work, seminars, education. I think that their work is wonderful. We've been inspired by them, but again, we don't have any direct cooperation with Musalaha. Are there more questions?
And I saw here a comment by David that our vision has to be more than just the near future, to 5 years down the world. We have planting seeds for 20 or 50, 70 years. Well, is that a question or a comment?
Just a statement, a comment.
Okay, thanks, David. And I agree. That's what I tried to say when I said that I try to also create long-term change, but also try to change the present. So it's always, I feel it has to come always together, side by side.
Fiona has another question. Is there a need for uni-national Israeli work in our groups, Raz?
Can you explain the question? What do you mean by uni-national?
Chad Leumi.
Oh, yeah. So yes, there is, and we try to do that. Actually, this year, I think because of the Zoom, the need has increased, and I got more than ever. I got questions from the Israeli side, texting, recording voice messages, calling up to me and the other instructors, and I understand that how much support they need. I think it's because we have less physical interaction, so they feel they are facing very difficult questions by themselves, and it's things that is very difficult to talk about sometimes with the other side. So we encourage the instructors from both sides to have also sessions on their own where they can just talk about things openly. We try to be as open as we can. I mean, one of the basic rules and roots is that you talk about everything and everything is okay as long as you don't assault the other side. So we did talk about very difficult and sensitive issues, but it is only very natural that there are things that you need to say in your own language with the people that understand you better, because also the language is something very difficult. They do not speak the same language, so it's always with translation. It's very, very, very important to support what we do together, also in every group by its own.
Do we have one or two last questions or comments?
I'd like to ask another question. And following up on the question asked before, so you mentioned that it can be a lot harder for 18-year-olds to, I guess, to consider the kind of work that you're doing. You mentioned that your colleagues would be ready for that now, more ready now than they would be when they were younger, I guess, before they had done the military service. So I guess that like one of the reasons for the high school program is to make something like that easier, to begin that before they, or to basically to make sort of what you've gone through easier for people who come from, I guess, the same part of Israeli society. Are there other things that could make that easier? Or are there other things that could make people, that could help people to be ready for that kind of dialogue and transformation before they have to go through the I guess, the military experience and the associated trauma that some people go through?
Yeah, so for me, the answer to this is education and all its aspects. And I feel that is why at Roots we don't try only to the program, but we try to also to speak to all kinds of pre-military academies and gap year programs, and also in schools. One of our missions, it kind of stopped in the middle because of the corona, but one of our missions for 2 years ago was to try and step in schools and to try, maybe also there are youth that are not ready to join full power youth program with Palestinians, but they might be willing to hear about what we do in the program. And then this was an idea. So a few of our students have taken on themselves to lecture to their school or to their class about what we do. And I feel that as I said, I mean, most of us do not even have in our mind, in our state of mind, the Palestinian side. Also, when I teach, I started teaching this year the history of the conflict in pre-military academies, and I see how much they do not know, and I try to give them a perspective. And I say it's not about who is right or wrong. It's about trying to look at the reality, which is the same reality, from both perspectives, from both narratives, from both sides, and trying to understand. I try to teach them that understanding the other side doesn't mean I agree with him. But if we want to promote some sort of solution or a life together, so we have to acknowledge the way the other side thinks like. And we have to know, and we have to have it in our mind all the time. And it's something that most people are not exposed to, sometimes ever. You can pass your whole life without being exposed to the Palestinian side perspective very easily.
Yes. Oriana wants to say something. Oriana.
Raz, this may or may not apply, but because I'm living in the US right now, I've been focusing a lot on the Black-white divide and racial justice on this side. And one of the books and one of the groups that I was led to this year until COVID sort of killed it was called My Grandmother's Hands. And it's about somatic experiencing and how both the whites have their trauma that they continue to inflict on others, and Black Americans have their own, certainly they probably even have more trauma, but it's about looking and experiencing with somatic exercises, not just to do the intellectual work, but to get to something that might be a little deeper. And that book is quite impressive. You might want to take a look at it. My Grandmother's Hands, and I'm sure there's several other things like that that you could incorporate into your work. But kol hakavod, I'm very impressed. While you were talking, I just made a donation, and I'm going to share your talk far and wide. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Kathy. And I will say that what you said is very, very important. And Rabbi Hanan here is in charge of a project that it's focusing on how to heal trauma and try to talk about our societies as societies with trauma that needs to be healed. And it is a core subject in our narratives in our societies.
I'll post the name of the author in the chat in a minute. I don't want to get it wrong. I have to look it up.
Thanks, that's a great idea.
Okay, that was a good way to end the mention of donations, because like David said, now we heard from Ariana, we really need your help to continue this work, not just to continue it, but to grow it and expand it. We now have our main center in Gush Etzion, Bethlehem, Hebron area. As you heard, with Raz's leadership, we've expanded to the Jordan Valley. Sometimes I've mentioned in the past, we now have a third branch in the north, Samaria, Ariel, around the area of Ramallah, up to Nablus. And we want to expand more and more because this is the grassroots peacemaking work, people to people, that's really going to allow a political solution to take hold. First, the people have to be ready. This is just so important. Raz, can you please let me share the screen? You're the host, I want to show something. So before I show what I want to show to end, I want to mention what we have for you next week. Same time, same channel. Next week, we have John Linden, who is the executive director of ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. ALMEP is a collection, an organization of about 120, perhaps 130 people-to-people peacemaking organizations, some of them similar to Roots, some of them very different. Of course, we're unique, but there also are connections and similarity to the other organizations. John is going to talk about the following: how the international community can help create long-term change in Israel-Palestine. Again, John Linden from ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace, how the international community can help create long-term change in Israel-Palestine. So please look at our website. Raz, make me a host if you can, or a co-host.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, can I have just 1 minute in the end?
Of course. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Not to let you close.
I'll make you a co-host. After you share the screen, whatever you need. It's yeah, you want to share the screen, or you want me to conclude first?
All right, good. You talk first.
Okay, so I want to conclude by saying that one of the most significant lessons I learned from Rabbi Fuhrman was the importance of using both hands. And it's something he would say every time he would talk in front of an audience. He would say, if you take a bird and you just let her use one hand, so what will happen? She will just go around herself. In order to fly, you need both wings, you need both hands. And in Roots, this is a place where I have learned to use both hands, to use in one hand my identity as a woman, as a religious Zionist, as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors and a daughter of immigrants who came to this land because they understood there is no other land. And in the other hand, to hold that same story from the other side, to hold the story that Shadi and Khaled and Mayar and Rahil also have a heritage and also have a connection and a deep connection to the same land, and that they also, by many means, have no other land. And I try every time I come to a meeting, doesn't matter when and where, with both sides, I try to hold them together. And this is what I want to share with you. So thank you so much for listening. It was an honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's exactly it. That's exactly Roots. This is wonderful. Really appreciate it. We're going to end with a 30-second video about our run in the Jordan Valley on March 15th. So please join us. March 14th, again, like us on Facebook, Friends of Roots. Look at our website, friendsofroots.net. Write to us and join the run March 14th, wherever you are around the world, and donate in honor of your favorite runner, and of course, in honor of Raz. Thank you.
I'm going to run as well.
And I am also.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for staying. I will be here for a few more minutes if anybody wants to ask for your further questions.
Great.